That is why Bill Barr, the former Republican Attorney General appointed by Donald Trump, respected by my colleagues on the Republican side, many comments they made when he left. He once said that Kash Patel would be promoted to FBI at the time deputy director over his dead body. That is Bill Barr's words, not mine.
Senator, you're one of the the most bipartisan members of Congress. You are known for keeping your head down and doing the work and getting shit done, even in a body, in a broader body of Congress where there are a lot of folks who are looking to, get their TV hits. Like you are sitting there and doing the work. How do you view the prospect of working with your Republican colleagues in this Congress, where it seems like it's
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the new CNN, the new mainstream media. These folks in independent media have sold you guys a bill of goods, talking about how mainstream media is so evil, it's so bad, and they do such a horrible job. And that instead of watching them, you should watch a bunch of random people with no journalism training, not really professionals in what they do. They're just sort of entertainers, they're influencers, relying on mainstream media for their news, right? They watch the mainstream media and then they report back what they see there, putting a little twist on it, or they're watching people on Twitter and then they're just repeating back to you what they see on Twitter, whether it's trending. Don't really have the training and understanding how to, you know, be objective and verify sources and all these professional techniques that people learn in these fancy schools. Um, but here's the reality. If you are terrified about what's happening in our country regarding the Republican Party taking over, if you are bothered by what MAGA is doing, right now, left wing media is heading us towards a future of more of that, right? People like Brian Tyler Cohen are trying to take over what mainstream media was doing, right? Mainstream media was a safe space, right? You notice that a lot of these Democrat politicians or Democratic politicians would go on mainstream media all the time, go on MSNBC, and go on CNN all the time. They felt comfortable. They felt at home. Um, that was a world where they would occasionally get called out. They would occasionally get asked tough questions, but mostly it was friendly. It was mostly peaceful, right? So they felt comfortable there. And then you had people like Brian Tyler Cohen, and no matter how friendly he was, and more friendly than mainstream media to a lot of these folks, most of them are afraid to even talk to him. Afraid to talk to people like David Pakman. I mean, he's super friendly. He's super friendly to the Democratic Party, but they were afraid to talk to him. Then they lost in 2024. Some of them got a little bit desperate, and then they start, oh, look at the Trump did the podcast and stuff. We gotta appeal to the youth, right? Let's we gotta get on the podcast circuit, right? And then they start looking, hey man, maybe we should go on shows like David Pakman and Ryan Tyler Cohen and even Destiny, right? And of course, these businessmen, these capitalists in left wing media, of course, they embrace this. It's better for their business, makes them more legitimate. I mean, look at how much money mainstream media was making, and they had sort of they captured the establishment in terms of they had access to everybody, the presidents, all the, Congress, all these top people in government, they had access to exclusive access, mostly 99% of the time, right? So the idea of independent media getting that kind of an access, that'll be huge for them, right? They can draw in some of the normies, right? Some of the normies start watching them. But then what does that lead to? What it leads to is CNN as a YouTuber. I mean, if you look at the garbage that these guys have been doing, like Destiny, uh, David Pakman, and Brian Tyler Cohen, doing these, like it's like I'm watching a Ben Shapiro interview a Republican, right? Go watch any interview of any Republican on a Ben Shapiro show or Steven Crowder show, right? They'll invite all these Republicans on their channels, and it's softball and stuff. A lot of this head nodding and they'll ask them questions where they frame it in a way where it's like you know, I know you guys are fighting really hard against those woke Democrats and this and that, and like they just laid out on a platter for them. They don't even have to think. So you're on an interview so you're a Republican on an interview with Ben Shapiro, and you don't even have to think about your framing and what's a good attack on like Ben Shapiro will give it to you, he'll hand it to you. Instead of just asking you a question, what are your thoughts on whatever, whatever? What are you going to do? Blah, 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 and let them answer. It's like, what do you think about this, that, and how the Democrats, and Joe Biden, and the woke policies. So now we're going to get that on Brian Tyler Cohen, right? He is the access journalist of the century. But now that access journalism poison is going to spread to other YouTubers on the left. So now David Pakman wants in on the action. Destiny wants in on the action. But here's the critical thing you have to understand what this is going to lead to. I mean, you already saw what it led to before when corporate news did it. What do you think is going to happen now when corporate news was mostly peaceful, but they will get aggressive sometimes, right? Brian Tyler Cohen is not going to get aggressive with a Democrat, right? He'll get aggressive with a Republican, but he's not trying to get aggressive with a Democrat. Right? You might ask some questions that kind of sound aggressive, but really, Brian Tyler Cohen is a safe space for a Democrat, right? David Pakman, same thing. Destiny, as far as I see, same thing. I don't see these guys. Mainstream media is barely critical of the Democratic Party as it is, right? These guys are even much less critical of the Democratic Party. Now, if you really love these guys, you're going to say, no, I hear them criticize them all the time. Listen, man, you could say the same thing about these right-wing buffoons. They literally criticize the Republican Party all the time. The critiques that they make it's almost like as mad as well they don't do it at all because the way they do it and when they do it, how aggressive they are when they do it, right? But technically they do it, right? So the fact that Brian Tyler Cohen might say something like Democrats need to fight more, and you have to notice the the focus of the critiques, right? I would more see Brian Tyler Cohen pushing back in terms of the Democrats need to be more aggressive in their fight, as opposed to him pushing them aggressively, like let's say minimum wage, right? They were trying to get it higher, and then Manchin was okay with getting it higher, but not as high. And then in the end, they didn't increase it at all. He's not pushing like this is unacceptable. They should have pushed for the $15. They should have at least, taken Manchin's offer as opposed to nothing. The American people need more. Brian Tyler Cohen ain't saying that, man. His critiques are going to be more. They need to fight back more. They need to have a spine more, right? Their rhetoric needs to be different, as opposed to delivering for the American people. Because you got to remember, Brian Tyler Cohen, he's doing well. He's making a lot of money. He can work from anywhere. I mean, he's very, very privileged. David Pakman, same thing. Destiny, same thing. So they're not in it with us, right? We're the ones that are going to have to suffer the failures of the Democratic Party. So let me break this down for you. If you are concerned with the way things are going in this country, I'm going to tell you what's required to stop it. What's required to win. For us to win, not for the Democratic Party to win, for us to win. A Democratic Party needs to deliver a much more than what they've been delivering. The bar needs to be recalibrated. Democrats love to talk about historic gains, right? They are proud to say that Joe Biden did more for labor unions than any other president in the last 20 years or something like that. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying those type of things they love to talk about. And then people like Brian Tyler Cohen love to help them to talk about that. But what they're missing is the bar is very low. What's been delivered to the American people has been very low. in comparison to, and this should be the only metric that anyone should be talking about, right? Whether you're Kyle Kalinske, David Pakman, Brian Tyler Cohen, all these left-wing guys, the only metric that you should be focused on, you should be talking about, is the metric based on needs of the American people today. Don't think about what previous guys did, and because that's how the Democrats lose. Well, they don't really lose. That's a topic for another video, but that's how they lose elections, right? Because their focus is on we're better than the other guy. Look at all the crazy stuff that Trump is doing, and he's chaotic. We're not as chaotic, and we at least do some things, right? They're letting him set the bar. So when Trump is way down here, Democrats are able to win elections by just being here. The problem is, what the American people need is way up here. And within this gap between what the Democrats are delivering and what the Republican Party is delivering, right? All this is a massive opportunity, a massive black hole that the right wing media is excellent at uh, taking advantage of, right? Because the result of this leaves a lot of people in America struggling, destitute, struggling to pay their bills, getting bankrupt because of healthcare, right? A lot of really angry, frustrated people. And the Republican Party is very, very good at capturing that anger and frustration and bringing them to their side. I mean, it seems crazy that the party that's delivering less for these frustrated people are able to capitalize on that anger, but life is not fair. It is what it is, right? When people are frustrated, this is a great situation for the Republican Party with their propaganda machine they have right now, right? So you got to get off this mindset of looking at historically. This is what was done historically, and this is where we're at now. And like, yeah, the Democrats did this, the Democrats did that, the Democrats did this, and they passed this other thing, and they passed this other bill, they passed this other bill. The only metric that matters is where the American people's needs are today, and how close you get to meeting or exceeding those needs, right? This mentality of being way down here, but we're higher than the historic bar, that's not cutting it, man. Because this zone here between what's needed and what's being delivered, the right wing media, they own that. That's their zone. How do we get to where we need to be? You need for the Democratic Party to go to war. And I'm not talking about a rhetoric war, although that's part of it. I'm talking about, I hate to say it, but you see the way Donald Trump is doing things right now? We recognize that it's not helping the country. He's making a mess of things. But there's that level of war. As soon as he gets in office, he's doing these bills and this and that, and this, let's change this, blah, blah, we're going to change this thing, blah, blah, blah. That's where we need the Democratic Party to be. Main difference is using that kind of energy actually for the American people as opposed to for your own self-interests. Imagine if when Joe Biden got elected, he went to war. Imagine that. As soon as he get in office, he's trying this thing with minimum wage. Try something else. That didn't work. You try something else. And in parallel, he's doing something else with the healthcare thing. He's pushing this thing with the infrastructure, whatever. He's got this housing thing going. Every day, Biden is doing something else, and the entire party is bang, bang, bang. Is this even legal that they're allowed to do it? Oh, they figured some loophole thing. They're doing this other thing and that, and they in your face every day loud. So the rhetoric is part of it, right? But the work is the most important thing. Because you can talk all the rhetoric you want, but if you're not delivering, it's not going to matter as much as you need it to be. That, what I just described, is not going to happen with an expansion of the independent media access journalism realm. Here's a critical thing you have to understand, which is the danger of people like Brian Tyler Cohen. These people are desperate for validation that may not be the best word, but the idea of having all these powerful, politicians coming on their shows. And it's kind of like, because Many of them started with a little bit of insecurity. I'm just some YouTuber, right? And then it starts growing up, and you get all the numbers, you're making the money, and you get the views coming in, and it kind of feels like, okay, I'm doing this. But you look at CNN, and they're in their big studios and making multi-million dollar whatever, and they're interviewing all the politicians who won't talk to you. There's a level of kind of rejection, right? These people are human, right? So the idea of finally being accepted into the mainstream, so you have these big Democrats coming on their shows, that's very seductive. And to think that all these years they were being ignored, now they're getting recognized. Now these people are coming on their shows. Who of them is going to be willing to go to war with the Democrats? Who's going to, so after all these years, you finally get them on your show. Imagine finally David Pakman gets, a top Democrat on his show. Imagine David Pakman, but you guys had a chance to do the minimum wage thing. Da, 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 da. You know what's going to happen if he does that. The instant that he does that, they're going to be like, okay, blacklisted. They weren't coming on the shows to begin with. If they start coming on the shows and then you start giving them real interviews, not giving them right-wing softball interviews to Republicans, you give them some real interviews, they're going to run for the hills, right? So you might think that that's why it's better for you to be softball. Here's the miscalculation. Softball interviews is part of how we got to where we're at. They were going on mainstream media, getting these same kind of softball interviews, making them feel comfortable. They could underdeliver because the media that a lot of their base was watching was friendly to them, right? So it wasn't being exposed, right? All their failures wasn't being exposed as much, right? A lot of their successes were being promoted by the media that were supporting them, right? So they were able to skate by underperforming, which led to Trump. Doing that in independent media, who's going to be even more afraid to go after these powerful Democrats because they will run away, is going to make the Democrats even more comfortable, which is going to make them have a feeling of, we don't need to really work as hard, right? Because if we could control the media like the way the right wing does, right? We just need to be more populist in our rhetoric, right? And we'll skate along and do just the bare minimum. And then David Pakman is going to back us up. Brian Carroll going to back us up. Yeah, this and that. And, before we had chaos with Trump and now with the Democrats, right? What that leads to is a lot of Americans' needs not being met and things are getting critical. People can't afford rent. They can't afford health care. I don't think people understand the stakes. The stakes are such that a good politician who does a pretty good job is a failure. I'm going to say that again. The stakes are so high that a good politician that does a pretty good job is a failure. We need warriors. We need people that are outstanding and exceptional because that's where we're at, right? It's in the context of a fireman. You have just a normal house fire, right? So just a good fireman can put it out. You just need a regular hose and regular standard run-of-the-mill techniques, and you can put it out. It's no big deal. What's happening in America is not a regular house fire. What we have is, I'm not a firefighter, so I don't know the lingo, but imagine some kind of chemical fire, right? It's a warehouse, and it's some kind of chemical warehouse, and there's all kinds of different flammable chemicals that maybe using water is a problem. So you need to know that there's certain techniques you need to use, right? So a fireman who's a pretty good fireman, who in normal situations would do a great job and get it done, is going to be a failure because that fireman who's just he's a good fireman, right? He doesn't have the skill level to deal with the intensity and the extremity of what's going on. So he's going to come in with just a regular water hose and wonder why it's not going out. And while he's learning on the job, because again, this is something requiring high-level expertise, right? While he's learning on the job, the entire warehouse is burning down, and the rest of the neighborhood is coming soon. That's where we're at. Independent media needs to be pushing the Democratic Party hard. They need to feel very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable. That's going to lead to them not being on your channels, which is going to require you to try to appeal to the people. Because the Democrats need their base in order to stay in power. Losing a presidential election, irrelevant. They still have their jobs, right? All the rest of these, you know, all the Democratic members of Congress, they're still there. They're still making their money. They're good. The risk to them is if their base revolts to where you're not just going to lose a presidential election. You're going to lose Senate seats and House seats if you don't shape up, if you don't go to war, if you don't start fighting hard, right? We need a massive pressure from the people. We need all of their phone calls, all their phones to be flooded with the American people saying, and take take out the context of where we're at now in this moment in terms of the Democrats don't really have power right now. Forget about in this exact moment. I'm just saying in general. There needs to be a war fought. And the only way that's going to happen is if the American people rise up and make the Democratic Party actually be scared. I don't think they're really scared right now. They might be nervous. They're not a monolith, so people have different attitudes. But I think generally speaking, they think, we'll be good, man. We're just gonna podcast. We're gonna go on Destiny and we're gonna be all right. How will that work? It didn't work when the mainstream media did it. Why would it work with independent media doing it? Why would a bunch of friendly interviews, right? You guys are gonna blow your channels up. Brian Tyler Cohen, maybe he's got 6 million subscribers in the future. David Pakman's got 10 million subscribers in the future, right? You get all his views, and you get Democrats coming on your show on a regular basis, and you're doing your little friendly thing, your little what's it called? I forgot. There's that liberal podcast, and you guys are all making that money. Your businesses are doing very well. What part of that leads to the Democrats getting terrified and feeling like rhetoric is not enough? We need to actually start putting in the work. We need to go to war the way Trump's going to war, but we need to go to war on behalf of our voters as opposed to what Trump is doing. The path that independent left wing media is on right now doesn't lead to that future. The path that they're on right now leads to toss up midterms. Maybe they win, maybe they don't. A loss for the presidential election in 2028. A lot can happen between now and then that can change that. But the path that we're on right now is one where they lose. Just like I warned 3 years ago, I said we're looking at a decade of going backwards. This is what I predicted. We're on that course. Ironically, the same reason why our politicians don't get it, because they're so separated from the people. They are elites, they're so wealthy, they don't have the same kind of concerns that regular people have. The same thing's happening with the independent media, right? Brian Tyler Cohen doesn't have to worry about healthcare. He's not worried about paying his mortgage, right? He's not in it with us. The more successful he gets, the more disconnected he gets from the people. So in his mind, Democrats could be, just barely getting by in terms of what they're delivering for the American people. But in his eyes, it might look like they're doing pretty good. They're actually doing a pretty good job. While you guys are out there struggling, can't pay your rent, can't pay your mortgage, don't have health care. Brian Tyler Cohen and David Pakman might be here. It's not as extreme as, the disconnection between our politicians, who, I mean, these guys are really wealthy, have a lot of power. They're really disconnected. Brian Tyler Cohen is not as disconnected, but he certainly is. Especially because he makes his own money. No one's going to fire him. Think about that. You have to worry about losing your job. He doesn't have that concern. You lose your job, you lose your health care. He doesn't have that concern. Prices of rents going up. That's your concern, not Brian's concern. And he's running a business that's very, very aggressive. It's very time consuming. So while he's focused on growing his channel and how, metrics and whatever, massive blind spots to what the average American is dealing with. Not unlike what we see with our politicians. The left is currently on a path that leads to failure. I'm going to continue saying this until they change course. A lot of people don't want to hear this. I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm here to tell you the truth. Most people can't handle the truth, which is why this channel will always be small, and I'm okay with that. I'm not here for money, not here for views, not here for fame. I'm here for you, trying to help people to wake up and open their eyes, even though I don't have a lot of faith that I'll be very effective, especially considering the channel's always going to be small. So it's kind of silly what I'm doing here, but I can't help but try. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Do with it what you will.